Okay. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Room 37 podcast by Postpone TV. I'm here with my co-host, Richard Vernon, and our guest today, it's Eerie Vaughn, founder of Danzig, Samhain, and also a member of the Misfits. Welcome, Eerie. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. How are you today, both of you?
We're all
We're
good,
great. I'm
thanks.
great. Thank you.
That's good. It's pouring rain here. It's been raining for like 5 months, so it's still raining again today. In case you wanted to know.
Huh, huh, huh. Where is that? Is that in Pennsylvania or
No, I'm in
Piedmont?
Kentucky. Yeah,
Kentucky.
I
Okay.
I I lived in Nashville for about 10 years, and I didn't realize it rained there like every day too. But Kentucky, I'm like 2.5 hours north of Nashville, and yeah, it's just been raining like so far all year. But
Wow.
Wow,
we had
that
one.
sounds like
I think we had sun.
I live in Wales,
Yeah,
Eerie. It's like it's exactly the same. It rains here 12
yeah.
months
I
a
was
year.
I was yeah I was going to say that. Yeah, you already know how it is.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, but yeah, anytime I see a show anywhere over there, I'm like, how did they get a sunny day? They're shooting a TV show. I'm like, where did they go to get the sunny day?
Yeah, Photoshop.
So Erie, I usually ask the questions regarding like the band and experiences and memories, and Richard usually asks questions related to how you started with the music, and so I'll let him start, and I'll jump in later to ask you about Samhain and Danzig and what you're up to now. Okay.
All right, whatever you like.
All right. Thanks, brother.
Okay, great. So, Eerie, it's a pleasure to meet you. I'm looking forward to this. So you're very well known, a multi instrumentalist, but you're also a photographer and painter. So I'm interested in the fact that you're kind of an all round artist rather than just a musician. So, what were your earliest artistic interests?
When I was like 5, I'd be in like kindergarten. I used to draw the cartoons out of the newspaper. Mostly Peanuts by Charles Schultz. They were the easiest ones to draw.
Yeah.
So I learned if I could copy stuff, looking at it and draw it, and I got pretty good at that. If I just like had to draw something out of my mind, it just was terrible. I couldn't understand why I couldn't just draw something. But yeah, I kind of started doing that at like real early age, and then just progressed to like painting, and then just been pretty much been doing that my whole life, with just periods of inactivity. Like during the band stuff, I didn't paint at all because I was too busy running around and having a really hot girlfriend and things like that. So painting in any kind of, I mean, it's a solitary thing, so you need time to and to be on your own to really do it. So in the last 25 years, I've been painting every day. So the photography thing came along sort of in middle school. For us, it's the seventh and eighth grade, right before high school, and then just got into that. And then this was an easy way to meet girls. You could say, hey, let me take your picture, and hey, do you want me to make you a copy of this? It's a great opening line. And
Is that
then I just kept taking pictures, and then
okay?
and the painting and all that stuff. I'd make T-shirts and all. It just one thing just kind of informed the other, and so it just, I don't know. It's got to come out some way, and it comes out in a bunch of different ways. So
Yeah, yeah, it does. So were you in an environment, so the school or the people around you at a young age when you were a kid, were they very open to you being an artist, being into the drawing and photography?
well, yeah. When I was a kid, say 8, 9 years old, yeah, if you were really good at something, they'd put it up on the wall, or they'd have these little contests, you know, and things where you could win a prize from some, I don't know what they would give you, but Yeah, so yeah, people thought it was pretty cool. I mean, at that age, you mostly get picked on and beat up and stuff, but yeah, that was, yeah, people were supportive, and I also got up in front of the class and like sang songs with a friend of mine, because I had this teacher who would ask people to get up and do their act, you know. So that was also something good, you know. But yeah, always people were always into it, and the kids I went to, you know, grammar school with always talk about how I was always drawing something, you know, or painting or whatever.
And what about your family? Were your family artistic at all?
My sister took lessons for painting. She painted oil paintings.
Okay.
And my other sister's a writer. My mom and dad didn't show any artistic ability. I don't think my dad could draw a straight line, but yeah, I don't know where it came from exactly. He took some piano lessons when I was a kid. It was a big thing in the 70s. Everybody had an organ. You could buy an electric organ from.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah.
Yeah, there was all these freestanding stores that we could just go in and buy an organ.
Yeah.
And so he had one of those and used to take lessons. But no, not really. I mean, I don't know where any of it comes from, you know.
Interesting. And how did music then come into your childhood? Well, how did that start?
Oh, well, that's where the influence was, because my dad was a big, you know, he grew up in the 50s, or graduated like in 55. Yeah. So all his music he still listened to. So that's what I kind of grew up on, was all the 50s doo-wop and, you know, all that oldie stuff, the vocal groups. He also liked Motown. So I got a lot of Motown influence, and we had good radio back then. You'd have these oldie stations that would be on all the time, and then they'd have special shows on the weekends. But yeah, all the music stuff came from him just playing the radio and liking all those songs that he grew up on that I still listen to, you know. And there was a lot of music in town where I grew up. Everybody was in a band. There was garage bands everywhere. Everybody played something, you know. So it just kind of, it just kind of happened, you know. Especially when punk rock came around, where you discovered that, it was like, it seemed so easy to just, like, you know, if you had a guitar, if you had, you know, a drum or something, you know, and you lived in town, you just, like, you formed a band with somebody. You know, so.
And do you remember? I mean, I remember being in school and first hearing punk rock like you did. Did you get it when you first heard punk? Did you know what they were doing? Because I didn't when I first heard it. That came a little bit later for me.
My sister's about 4 years older, so let's see, and she would have been the right age to go to clubs and things. You know, like maybe 18, 19. And I would be, say, 14, 15. So she'd sneak me in. But she was the one who was bringing home the records. You know, like back then, we had a couple of stores that you could buy records for like $5 for an album, you know. And then we had New York right next to us that we could run in and go to all the independent little shops and pick up, you know, 45s, you know, from England and stuff like that, you know. So yeah, she brought in like the Ramones, the Clash, the Pistols, you know, and then other stuff. But that was the first stuff I heard, and yeah, no, I got it right away. It was just like, I'm like, yeah, I totally dig this, because I liked music anyway, but it was the perfect timing, because it seemed like, well, that's at that age, 14, 15, you want to start kind of going your own way and rebelling, you know, and it was a perfect storm, you know.
Yeah, I remember thinking with the punk stuff, when I heard it then, I remember thinking it was a bit of a shock, because I was kind of like listening to Deep Purple and Thin Lizzy and stuff. I knew it, you know, still great bands, but I remember when I heard the Stranglers and the Buzzcocks, I remember thinking, God, all you need is in these songs. You don't really need anything else. It was so exciting, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, totally. I love the Stranglers. That came a little bit later for me during the hardcore period. I had
Right.
friends that were really into the Stranglers, and they loved, how smart they were and how sarcastic they were, and the things that they were writing about. And yeah, I was a little young to get all of that, but I got the sarcasm and the funny part of it, and the great playing. I just loved, the musicianship from that band. But yeah, it was a great time but there was only like a handful of people. Like in town, there'd be like 3 or 4 people that were into punk rock. So you all had to be friends with each other. And then you turned each other on to different bands and stuff like that. Because it was dangerous. You could get your ass kicked for looking like, the way you looked back then, or shaving your head, or having a mohawk, or whatever. You were taking your life in your own hands,
Yeah, that's true. That's funny. That I was chatting to, I remember chatting to Wayne from the Mission about 6 months ago, just on a phone call. We were talking about how different the world was then when you were a kid, because like there was a lot of violence around then, wasn't there? Just in everyday life, you could get beaten up for next to nothing.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons I was taking pictures in high school, because like the football players would bully you and like shove you up against the locker, or, whatever. But if I was taking pictures, I'd make friends with all these people, and then I would print pictures in my dark room and then say, hey, hey, give this picture to your mom or whatever. So they would become more friendly, and then they wouldn't like beat me up because I'm the photographer guy who gave them pictures for their mother,
yeah. Man, there's so much truth in that. I know exactly what you're saying. So, do you think being an artist affects how you see life and how you see the world?
Oh, completely. And I'm just going to be 61 in like August. So at this point in my life, I'm doing whatever I want. I'm listening to whatever I want. I'm watching whatever I want. I'm ignoring whatever I don't want to deal with. Yeah, it totally. To me, all I care about is the latest painting I'm working on, or what the next batch of songs, or whatever. So I'm living what they call a poet's life. You probably know what that is. You get up, you work, and then you have lunch, and then you go back to painting or writing or whatever, and then you have dinner, and then you go back to painting, and that's your whole day, and that's your whole life, and that's what I do. And I try to sell a few things so I can keep the lights on.
That's a very admirable way to live. I remember I had a friend who used to be a press agent for. He was a press agent for loads of techno bands like Orbital and Ultramarine and people, and he was really successful. But he never liked it. He loved music, but he hated journalists. So that's a bad thing to be if you're a press agent. And he just decided to give it up one day, and he just went and painted and did his artwork. And he said, I'm going to be poor, but I'm going to lead a bohemian life. And he said, that's what I want to do. It sounds a bit pretentious, but he just marched to his own tune. That's a decision he made.
Yeah, well, I didn't really, I mean, I guess I made the decision to be just, a musician and whatever else when I was like 18, 17. I remember my dad, I was just putting out a record, and, I don't think I started with Glenn yet, but he was like, I think you should think about something else to do. And I said, well, I can't. This is what I have. This is what I'm supposed to do. It's the only thing I want to do. And, didn't realize that I was just going to be poor my whole life. But as long as there's enough, what did Keith Richards say? As long as there's enough money to buy strings, we didn't care. It's easy when you're in your 20s, but when you're in your 60s, it's a little bit harder to have that attitude. But it's pretty much like that. I don't want for very much. I don't need very much. There's not a lot of luxury, but that's okay. I have a place to live, a roof over my head, and I have paints, and I have my guitar, and stuff. So I pretty much try to make my wife happy and take care of the cats, and that's pretty much it. I don't really want anything else.
No, I think that's an admirable way to be. I totally get it. Tony's normally got a few more specific music questions. So, Tony, do you want to jump in on this?
Well, sure. I mean, there's so many questions that I don't even know where
That's
to
a good one.
start. Well, is it? I sense that you were the closest to Glenn Danzig out of the whole group. Is that? Am I accurate
Yeah,
there?
we were friends. We became friends before we ever started working together. Yeah, we liked all the same things, and so we hung out. We'd go into the city, and if he had business to do, we would go see movies and we would just hang out and talk, you know. So yeah, we were tight,
So you grew up in Lodi, in
Yeah,
New Jersey?
yeah, we all went to the same schools and everything. Glenn was just the oldest, so he graduated. He's 9 years older than me, so he graduated high school in 1973, and then Jerry graduated in 77, and then Doyle and I graduated in 82. So did Steve. Yeah, we all went to the same, through the same school system.
Steve Zing?
Yeah.
What about Calabrese? Calabrese.
Oh yeah, he was there too. He was there too, but he wasn't
So,
into punk rock. He was one of the stoner guys who like played drums and listened to Led Zeppelin or whatever. Like when he joined the Misfits, I was very surprised because he never showed any like leanings towards punk rock or nothing. So I was like, oh, okay.
right. Okay, so going back to Rosemary's Baby, is that correct?
Yeah.
That was your first real band, we could say.
Yeah, I don't know how real it was, but it was a band. Yeah, I had tried to take drum lessons when I was a kid down at the local boys club. A friend of mine was in the fife and drum corps, and he was a really good drummer. And he said, "Well, come down on whatever day and once a week, and you got to pay like $5 or something. And this guy teaches you how to play drums." And so I tried that for a while, but I didn't really like the teacher, and I was more into sports. I played baseball and stuff at the same time, so I kind of lost interest in it till I got into high school, and then I was friends with Doyle, and he wasn't in the Misfits yet, but I started playing drums again because I got into them, and I had heard they always needed a drummer, and he told me that. He says, "You should just learn all the Misfit songs because we always need a drummer." And then he joined the band, and it was more like a thing where I was gonna, I was like destined to be the drummer at some point, So I picked it up back then. But Rosemary's Babies, yeah, we were just graduating high school, I think, and started the band with another guy who went to Lodi High School, and just wanted to put out records and just it was the hardcore thing, had something to say and wanted to, be heard. And, this is the easiest way, I suppose.
Okay, and how did you end up in the Misfits from there?
Well, it was just a normal progression because by that time I was friends with Jerry and Doyle and Glenn, and was making T-shirts. I was doing the pictures and all that stuff, and it was just one of those things. I tell people before, it's like if you lived in town and you could get to rehearsal, then anybody could have been in the band. That was the biggest thing, showing up and not rocking the boat and just rehearsing like every day or a couple times a week. That's all you needed to do. So I went down when they were in between drummers, and you just practice with them. And I played all the songs way too fast because my band was a hardcore band, so we played super fast. And the Misfits were like slower back then. And so I played all the songs way too fast, but at least they liked the way I played. So I got the job, and then like this was on a Friday night, and by Monday I was decided I didn't want to be in the band because I was in the middle of putting out my record of my band, and I didn't want to just be the drummer. In my band, I was like the big shot. I was like wrote songs, did all the T-shirts, did all the interviews and the publicity and stuff. And I was just like, I don't know if I want to just be the drummer, because they had a lot of drummers. It didn't seem like a very secure position. And I think Doyle and I were like not talking to each other or something, because he was mad that I was hitting on his girlfriend, but I wasn't really. So I was a Misfit for like 2 days, and then I went back and auditioned again. Well, not really auditioned. Like months later, when they hadn't really found anybody, and then all of a sudden Robo from Black Flag became available, so they just went with him. But yeah, I think if I had joined the band back then, I don't know if Glenn and I would ever form the other bands. Like he might have just wanted to get away from that. So it probably worked out the way it was supposed to work out.
Well, like in many cases. So you're the founder of obviously Danzig, but before that, Samhain. How did that start?
Well, it's just at the end, like I said, Glenn and I were friends. We were talking on the phone all the time and hanging out, and he just was like not happy, wanted to go in a different direction. Told me those guys didn't want to rehearse as much, only wanted to do gigs on the weekends. So the band was kind of run its course, and he was ready to do something else. And I was just like, yeah, some of my guys ain't showing up for rehearsal. I don't know what's going to happen. We put out a record, and then some guys just lost interest. So he's just like, well, you want to do a band with me? I want to do a new band. And I was just like, yeah, sure. Why not? I already liked what he was doing with the Misfits. I was a fan, so I was like, yeah. And when you're in town and you're that age, you just want to play with the best people you can, So it's like, this is the best guy in town. He's got a great voice. He writes great songs. I want to do a band with this guy. So that was it. He said, okay, I'm gonna tell the guys in the Misfits I'm leaving the band, and when we come back, we'll start the new thing. I'm like, okay. So it was like the next Monday or Tuesday, we were in my basement working on the Samhain songs. So it was just that, and we had like 6 months later, we were doing the first Samhain show. So it didn't take very long from when the Misfits broke up to start the new band.
You were one of the founders, and who came up with the name? Because it's a very interesting name for the band.
Yeah. Glenn had already probably had the name in his head, because he was also writing songs that he wasn't given to the Misfits. Like when you're a songwriter, you write stuff, and if it's not right for the current project or whatever band you're in, you just leave it on the shelf until like it might be used down the road. So he had written a couple of songs he was already trying to save for the new band, but he wound up giving a couple of them to the Misfits because they needed a couple of songs for Earth AD, and that's a really short record. So we just he had the name, he had like the concept, this is what he wanted, and I was just like, yeah, all the shit that you guys have already done, and all the artwork, and all the songs and stuff, it was already cool anyway. I was like, I just wanted to get in on that. So I was like, yeah, dude, like let's do this thing,
Yeah, the sound got a lot darker, and obviously it progressed. It wasn't the sound of punk anymore. How did you pick up the bass? Were you actually trying to be the drummer, or how did that change?
Yeah, I already had the drums and all the amps and shit for my band set up in the basement of my parents' house. So Glenn just came over and like picked up guitar that I had, and I played drums. And yeah, we never sat down and like talked about what he wanted to do or what the concept was. It was just like, here's a song, here's a new song. It was always like that. So I tried playing drums on them, and they were all like weird timing, and like I just couldn't cut it. So we tried it a couple of times. Even brought the guitar player from Rosemary's Babies down in to kind of flesh things out. And it was just between him, Glenn, and I was just like, dude, I'm not cutting it. And he's like, yeah, but I want you to be in the band. And he goes, well, why don't you just play bass and we'll get Steve to play drums? Because Steve had a car. Steve lived in Lodi. You know, he already had his kit set up in his bedroom. I was like, yeah, no problem. So I just went down to the local music shop and picked out a bass that I liked. It felt good, bought it, and then started playing bass like the next day or whatever. And Glenn would say, okay, this song's in A, and he'd point to the neck and say, that's that note there. Just do that until I tell you to change, then go to here. So that was it. I had to learn all the songs by sight and just try to figure out where the notes were eventually. But he said, yeah, you shouldn't be behind the drums. You're too big a ham. You should be up front, you know, like on stage so everybody could see you. And I was like, yeah, I dig that, you know. So it just kind of happened, you know. Like I said, anybody, just like, you know, anybody who was there probably could have just picked up and, you know, would have been in the band. That's just the way it was. So, but we were friends. He wanted to be in a band with me. I wanted to be in a band with him. So that was just it. It's like, I'll play bass instead of drums. Who cares, you know?
And you picked out a badass bass because Richard plays that same bass, and that bass design and sound to me is legendary. You know, the Fender. You had the P bass, right?
No, I play a jazz bass. I tried the P bass first because I picked up the P bass first because, you know, Sid played one and Dee Dee Ramone played a P bass. It was just kind of like the punk rock bass. Like I think Paul from the Clash played one, but I didn't like the neck. It kind of got stuck in my hands, you know, kind of like a Gibson neck. You know, it just didn't. It was too fat. So I picked up the jazz bass right after that, and I said, yeah, this one will work. And that was as far as it was. I didn't know nothing about it. I just knew that it felt okay, and that I could work with it. So yeah, I've played jazz bass forever. I never liked the P bass, and it also came with flat wound strings. I didn't like that, you know. So yeah, it was just a thing. It was just a thing. I said I knew it's got to be black, you know. That was one of the things.
Yeah.
And I was working a good job. I had lots of cash on me. I was making like $400 a week. So I just went down and paid cash for the thing and took it home. That was the end of it.
Yeah. Super. So from Samhain, how was the transition into Danzig? Obviously, you're the only member that from Samhain went on to Danzig. Was Biscuit? How did he? Was he recruited, or how did that work? John Christ also was recruited into Danzig.
Well, the band was just evolving. You know, Glenn wanted a different guitar player. I don't know. He wanted something else, something different, and he just decided he wanted to change guitar players. So Pete got kicked out of the band, and then we started auditioning guitar players, and we had like 30, 40 guys, and John was like one of the last ones. He came into the band through London May, who was a drummer at the time. His dad worked with John's dad and said, hey, my son's band's looking for a guitar player. So John drove up about 5 hours from Baltimore to come to New York to audition, and he got the job as a guitar player. And then we kicked London out of the band because he wasn't cutting it as a drummer. So Glenn was just like, well, I think Rick Rubin was in there at the time and said, well, who's your favorite drummers? You know, who would you have if you could have anybody? And he said he wanted Phil from Motorhead, or Chuck Biscuits from, and Chuck had been in Black Flag and the Circle Jerks and DOA. And, you know, not for nothing, but Filthy Phil would have been a great drummer, but he wouldn't have he was older. He wouldn't have just done what you told him. You know what I mean? So that definitely wasn't going to work. And when we called Chuck, he was in between bands, and all he wanted was a plane ticket out there, and that was the end of it. So we We found him a place to live. He didn't have to audition. He just showed up and he was Chuck fucking Biscuits. So, you know, that was it. And John got the job from, you know, as auditioning, and then that was it. You know, and the band just changed its name because I'm pretty sure Ruben and Glenn were talking about maybe a fresh start. You know, like Rick was always afraid that the imagery, you know, the blood and the devil locks and the makeup and stuff was going to alienate a large group of potential listeners. And when he told, you know, he asked me, he said, "Don't you want as many people as possible to hear the band?" And I was like, "Yeah." He goes, "Well, a lot of people won't even buy the record because of the way you look or whatever." And I was just like, "Okay, I'll think about it." And the band really, once Chuck and John got into the band wasn't the same band anymore. So changing the name was no big deal. When Glenn said, thinking about changing the name to Danzig, and I said, "Ooh, just like Bon Jovi." And I was like, "Who cares?" It was all about the music. It didn't really matter. And since John was a metal guy, I was just like, you know what? He was turning me on to like Black Sabbath and like AC/DC and stuff, because I never listened to that, because that was like long-haired heavy metal shit that I didn't like because I was a punk rock guy. And I just thought, I said, you know what? This stuff's pretty good, and it's kind of close to what we're sounding like. And I like the way these guys look, so I just stopped shaving, stopped cutting my hair, and I was like, "That's it. I'm in. New band," you know.
Right. And how did Rick Rubin get involved with Danzig? Was that how did that relationship start?
Well, he was still doing Def Jam in New York. He was working with Slayer, and he was just starting to record the Cult record, maybe the Electric record, and he was still doing his thing. And they had an office down on Elizabeth Street, and he had his guys, you know, just like you do, A&R guys sniffing around the clubs looking for bands. And one of his guys must have told them to check us out, because we were doing this showcase. It was called the New Music Seminar, and they'd have like the cream of the crop of the indie bands that didn't really have like a real record deal, or maybe they had like a small independent label. So they would just look around, and he came to one of those shows, thought the whole thing was incredible, as he used to say, and gave Glenn a card. And then we just started talking to the guy, and he would take us out to dinner, and, you know, the whole record company wine and dine kind of thing, and which was nice at the time. And he just thought the whole thing was great, and he loved Glenn's voice. He loved his whole attitude, you know. And he was a big wrestling fan. Him and Glenn used to go see wrestling, and I think at the time, you know, we were all thinking about something on a more of a theatrical type level, you know, like where it would be sort of combining the two things. I don't know. It was really weird, but yeah, Rick just happened to see, you know, probably saw dollar signs, or he just liked the fact he wanted another band like Slayer that had played guitars, and maybe he was ready to move away from the rap stuff, you know. It's just kind of serendipity.
Yeah.
I think.
I put up today an old commercial. I don't know if you saw it, of you guys, Danzig. It had Danzig first, and then Slayer, then Def Jam. You can find the records at these stores. I don't know if you saw it, but it's very, very old. Must have been like 88 or 89. How did and I'm almost done here. I just have some more questions. Danzig
That's okay.
1. It was a sound that it wasn't heavy metal. It wasn't like heavy rock. It wasn't alternative. It was just a sound of its own. And obviously with Danzig 2 and 3, it kept evolving. How did you guys come up with that sound?
Yeah, well, the sound of the band is really more like the second record and the third record. The first record sounded like that Cult record, which Ruben had just done, and that was his first like real rock and roll record, you know. And I was at the studio when they were recording some of that, It was down at Electric Ladyland at Jimi Hendrix studio, and they were doing that. They were doing that Love Removal Machine song. That was like a single from that album, and they wanted to, be more of a rock band because they were kind of like, more of an underground alternative kind of band, sort of hippie goth, and so he took away all the frills, all the swirly guitars, all the stuff that wasn't part of the main song. And when you listen to it, it just comes down to like AC/DC type stuff. So he brought all that out of them. And then when he comes to our project, he was still enamored with that really dry drum sound, no reverb on anything. So he wanted it to be raw, and that was his vision. The rest of the band, I'm not sure about Glenn. I haven't asked him in a long time, but we didn't really like it because it didn't sound like us. Like in rehearsal, the way we sounded was still, it had balls, and that thing was just, it was too thin. Everything was too up front. I would have been happier if the record sounded more like the second one. They put a little reverb on it. I was used to the spooky stuff, Samhain stuff was all spooky. Misfits, Glenn had reverb on everything. He double tracked the vocals, stuff like that. So this sound was basically his thing. And I liked AC/DC, but I couldn't stand Mother because that just sounded like an AC/DC song to me. And I was like, that's not what this band's all about. But a lot of people like the way it sounds. Sometimes they say that's their favorite record because of the way it sounds. So I don't know, but eventually, by the time the original band ran its course, we sounded more like we actually sounded,
So with Mother being remixed and a lot of footage being taken from big shows, arena shows, and shows in actually England and Ireland and Wales, do you prefer that sound or the sound from the original Mother? Even though I know you don't like the song, you just said.
No, well, it just wasn't a good example of the band. That's why I didn't like it. It wasn't really, the song wasn't really remixed. It was more or less re-released. You know what I mean? Because it didn't really change much. I think they just added some crowd noise or something to go along with the video. That was another problem. They wouldn't play any of our videos, so we weren't selling any records to speak of, or we were selling maybe just under gold record status. And so when we did this video, it was just to try to capture the band live because it was always like a huge punk rock show because we were still Chuck and Glenn were still punk rock guys in our heads, still are. And so the shows were really like these big kind of, crazy gang fights where everybody would just go nuts. So we wanted to capture that and shot a bunch of footage and got this great video together. And I think it must have been Ruben's idea. It's like, well, this song should have been a hit like 8 years ago. So let's just put it out again with this video. Same thing happened with Aerosmith. They put out Dream On their first album and it did nothing. And it became a radio hit like years later, just DJs playing it on their own. So I prefer the sound of the band from like our third record. That's really what we really sounded like. But I was just happy that they were playing a video and then all of a sudden we were selling records, and if we could have just been doing that all this, if we could have been doing that all this time, would have been great instead of putting out videos that nobody was going to play, and that was part of the game. You needed to get as many people to see the stuff. And once it was on MTV, like all day, then people were like, oh, this is pretty cool. And they started buying the record. So,
so
I like that.
The sound of How the Gods Kill, do you think that's the sound that you guys should have stuck with going into Danzig 4, which it was complete different, or there was a lot of differences in the mixing, the sound, and everything?
No, Danzig 3 is like the best example of what the band really sounded like at the top of its game. The reason Danzig 4 sounds more underground is because that's what Glenn always did. Like as soon as you get some popularity or whatever, he wants to go back underground, So it turned out to be more of like a Samhain album. It had that kind of vibe to me when we were doing it. Like the songs, the structures were different. They were more underground, more like this is the song, and it doesn't have to have a verse and a chorus and a guitar lead. It just, the song comes out the way it comes out. So I totally understood that record. But people who bought the Mother record or the Thrall live record were maybe expecting that same sound, and we were going in another direction. But our longtime fans understood what we were doing,
Yeah.
Just like, I mean, if you listen to somebody for a long period of time, and by that time Glenn had a pretty good body of work going, that you're supposed to challenge your audience a little bit and say, well, this is what we're doing. You either come with us or you don't. And a lot of people are like, nah, I don't understand it. But like 30 years later, they're all going, oh, that's one of my favorite albums. And it sounds like a Samhain album. I'm like, yeah, well, I told you that 30 years ago. So, but
Right.
yeah, I don't know. The band's just, I think the band was evolving the whole time. Like any good band shouldn't stay the same. I mean, when you start out as a punk rock, in a punk rock band, you play punk rock because that's what you could play. That's what you want to play. But if you keep playing, you keep getting better, and you wind up turning into a different band. And a lot of your audience doesn't either comes with you or doesn't. And you'll get new fans. That happened from the Misfits to Samhain. We lost a bunch of Misfits fans. We gained some new fans. When we went to Danzig, we lost a bunch of fans again. And we had to build up the new thing and stuff. But, you can't keep putting out the same record year after year just because that's what your fans want. Eventually, they won't buy it because they already have that record, So,
Right.
it was just a challenge. Mm-hmm.
And also, when Danzig 4 came out, grunge killed a lot of heavy metal or heavier bands. And I thought maybe the change of sound was because, like, it reminded me a little bit of Tool. I don't know. I thought it was because of that a little bit.
Oh, yeah, I don't know. I never paid attention. I don't know what Glenn was thinking at the time, but we pretty much never cared what anybody else was doing. And grunge mainly killed the hair bands, and we weren't a hair band. It was all like if you were heavy, it was perfectly fine to all that stuff. To me, that was just all those guys were into punk rock, so that was just their version. Because they all had that same attitude. They're just going to do what they want, and if you like it, great. And that's punk rock to me. It's just do whatever you want, and if people want to show up to the shows and buy the records, that's good too. But it wasn't to me. It wasn't a conscious choice. Well, everybody who writes songs, they write songs about they're in whatever mood they're in or whatever point in their life they're in. That's why the records go from one to the next. Like it's going to reflect in whatever you do artistically where you are in your life, and that's just I think where Glenn was at the time. And plus, Chuck and John, they were losing interest. They, didn't really care about some of these new songs. I thought they were great, but the band was like running its course. So I don't know what would have happened if we would have stayed together for the next one. But Glenn wanted to go in that industrial, more underground, more industrial, crazy way, and that was the best way for him to do it. It's like, yeah, okay, well, you can.
So can you tell us a little bit what happened? How the original lineup broke up, or who started leaving first? I don't remember who was the person that left first, but I remember seeing a commercial. It was like a hotline. If you want to hear what I'm doing, call this number, or it was 2. Were you in that hotline number, or do you even remember about that commercial that I'm talking about?
Yeah, I was. I don't remember that, but I ran the hotline from the beginning, like around we started the fan club around 88, 89, and we got a company, and they said, well, we do this. We set up a phone number, and you can talk to the fans and leave messages and stuff. So I started running that thing, and most of the fan club stuff, just mainly because we weren't getting promoted enough that people didn't even know when we were playing. So I started, every time I could publicize the number, I would say it, radio stations, tell Glenn to tell it on, write it in interviews or whatever, and just listed all the tour dates. And once we did that, like, our attendance like doubled in no time. So I used to put little snippets of like unreleased songs in the background, and or I'd put the phone next to the speaker and say, here's the song we're working on, and play it for a couple of seconds, and then come back and say, okay, we're going to be in Kalamazoo on Friday the 30th or whatever, and just list all the dates, just say what the band's doing, or, make messages from, hey, we're on a video filming for this, that, and the other thing, and, whatever, just stuff like that. So that's how people heard about the band and that hotline thing. But now Chuck quit the band first. We were in the middle of the Metallica tour, and the record hadn't come out yet, I don't think, the fourth one. And he said he just wasn't happy anymore, just wanted to do something else, so he quits the band. And then we worked in a new drummer, got Joey C, who played with Queens of the Stone Age for like 10 years, 12 years. He's playing with Circle Jerks now, a real good drummer. And then John was just like, he was never that happy in the band, so he told me he was going to quit after that album cycle, and we would be back home with nothing to do anyway. So he was going to split. And I was just like, yeah, well, if you're going to leave, then I'm not staying either, because once Chuck left, a lot of the soul of the band was gone, and it wasn't fun anymore. So the band just pretty much ran its course, and it was time to change. And it was good. I think it was good for Glenn, because he didn't have to worry about doing anything and people still going, oh, well, it doesn't sound like the original band or whatever. So he was free to do whatever he wanted, and the rest of us could just go do whatever the fuck we wanted. So it just kind of happened. The band was together for like almost 9 years. So that's a pretty good amount of time. It just kind of fizzled out.
Right. And what did you think about doing right after Danzig? Did you think about, am I going to get back into music? What am I going to do now with my life?
No, I'm in the same position I am now. I was just like, yeah, right. I'm going to put out a record. I knew I wanted to put out a record. I just didn't know what I was going to do, if I was going to start a band, or I was just going to do it all on my own. I haven't figured out how I was going to sing, or if I could pull it off or whatever. So I put out a soundtrack kind of record, get my feet wet, and with a friend of mine, just went in the studio and did, songs that would be, soundtracks for, a movie or for an, TV show or any of this kind of stuff, just to get back in the studio and get used to doing that stuff. And then just progress from there. I just, okay, I want to make another record. Just kept going. I wasn't gonna really change anything. It's just like, okay, now I don't have a band, so I'll just do something on my own, and just kept making records,
Right.
Time goes by, and you have to, you just do what you do.
Time goes by. Just two quick questions, because I know that Rich needs to ask you, and then we'll come back and ask you about your paintings and your books and everything. Would you ever do a reunion with the original lineup? Because I know that John Christ has been trying to tour. He actually play with somebody, like a cover band in some festival in Houston not too long ago. Are you still talking to any of the guys as well?
Yeah, I talked to Chuck and John. I talked to all the Misfit guys. Pete from Samhain, I'm still in touch with. Yeah, John's just going out and playing the hits once in a while. He picks up, has a pickup band or a guy he likes to handle the vocals or whatever. But I think John, I haven't really talked to him about it, but I think he was just getting back into playing because he had a really bad car accident and he damaged his hand and he couldn't play. So it took him like all this time to get back into where he felt confident playing again, and just wanted to go out and see if he still liked it and stuff. So I don't know exactly what he's doing. I don't know if he would do a reunion, but I have no interest in doing a reunion. I mean, like, one of the reasons I left the band in the first place is because I wasn't into it anymore. And I'm still, you know, I'm at my age, I don't want to go back and play stuff that I did when I was in my 20s. And I just don't. Okay. To me, the music and the band was everything. And the music made me crazy. And it was so much a part of my life and my personality. But it's not anymore. Like, I could get up and play, you know, the music that I'm doing now or some other type stuff, but I can't get up and headbang and like be all intense, you know, and all that stuff. It would just be going through the motions, and I'm not doing that, you know. And you know, and I'm sure Glenn has no desire to reform the original band. He's had, you know, since the band broke up, like, I don't know how many years ago, 30 years ago, he's had 1 million guys in the band. It doesn't matter to him who's in the band, you know. So
right. Well,
I don't see any sense. I only want to move forward, and that's what I've been doing all this time. So, like, if, you know, he wanted to get together, maybe make a record, yeah, I could see doing that, just because I like to make records. But just go up and play the hits and like go, oh, wasn't that great? Whatever. I'm not into that. You know, that was great. Yeah, that was then. This is now. I don't care. I'm sorry that so many people weren't even born, you know, when the band, you know, started, or when the Misfits broke up or whatever. Those people got to see them, but, you know, they don't get to see us. It doesn't really matter to him. He can have anybody play the same songs. The band sounds great. Whoever he's got playing, you know, at the time, everybody seems to be happy. There's no real reason for a reunion, you know.
Yeah, Richards, I'm sorry, man. I'm taking all your time here.
No, it's all good. No problem.
Just the last thing well, I saw you guys in '93, and one thing about Glenn is that he would always bring on some of the best opening bands. Like, I saw you guys with Godflesh and Typo Negative and Cold Chamber. I mean, it was amazing.
Oh yeah.
So, and all those bands, you know, went on to be, you know, big. So you guys always gave a chance to these bands to, you know, it was an amazing show. And I remember you, and I love the look. I saw you guys in Texas, so it looked like everybody had new hats, like black cowboy hats and black brand new boots, just because you guys were in Texas. Maybe I'm wrong, but you guys looked awesome, and I have so many great memories. And yeah, thank you for doing this.
We always tried to bring new, you know, bands that we thought needed a more attention or should be heard. You know what I mean? So it was like White Zombie. You know, we toured with Soundgarden. They of course were already doing fine. They didn't need us. But Typo was another band. Yeah, a lot of those. Caius. It was always important to have a good bill that you with similar bands, but bands that you also wanted to give a little bit more attention to, because, like, you know, in the way it goes, when you're an opening act, you know, you got to pay your dues until you get to a certain point to where you're, you know, higher up on the bill or you become a headliner. So you don't get all the sound. You know, like the sound man can't play louder than the headliner, and you can't use all the lights to show up the headliner. So, you know, we didn't really want to do that to the opening bands because we weren't afraid of anybody. We were like, yeah, go out and kick ass because we're still going to be better than you in the long run anyway. You know, it's still our show. You're just the opening act. So it's a hard cycle to break, but that's usually the way it goes. At least it was in the old days. And so we weren't really doing that. We wanted to turn people on to good bands, make sure it was a great bill, and that people had, would come away with a fan of another band and go out and buy their records. And like I said, we weren't worried about anybody showing us up. So we would bring anybody out,
Just real quick, any memories of, like, what's your best memory of touring with Metallica?
Oh, we drank a lot back then, so I don't have a lot of memories. I can, if I see pictures, a lot of times I can sort of, or if I get together with somebody who was there, kind of jog my memory and stuff. But no, we hung out when we weren't on tour. When those guys would come to town, or we'd be in their neighborhood, we would just hang out anyway. So just hanging out and causing trouble and doing shit with those guys was fine. The only thing I can remember right off is Glenn never wanted to go. When those guys came into town, James would call me and say, "Hey, we want to go out. We got a day off. Let's go out and get drunk or something." He says, "See, we get Glenn to come out too." And I'm like, "He's not coming out. He doesn't want to do that because he's older than everybody else anyway." And I was like, "He's already done that shit." He's like, "I try to get him out." So we went out. Me and Glenn and Kirk and James went to the Cat Club in New York, which is a pretty small place, but it was a cool little hangout. And we were just there, and we were just drinking and stuff, and they were like, "Let's get up and do some songs." So I played drums, Glenn sang, Kirk played bass, and Kirk played guitar and James played bass. We played two or three Misfits songs, and nobody even knew. They couldn't figure out. Like, nobody knew. You couldn't. We weren't so high profile that you could just go, "Oh, those are the guys in Danzig." Even Metallica at the time was not a huge band, so nobody even knew. They just thought there was a bunch of long-haired guys getting up playing Misfits songs.
Wow!
But we did that any chance we got.
Yeah, what an amazing story.
I don't even remember who was in the club. I just remember the drum set was pink, I think. And I think I broke the snare drum. I can't remember.
Well, I'm going to bring back Richard. I've never took so much time off his hands, and we've done many of these shows already. So let me get back to Richard. Otherwise, he may not even talk to me anymore.
No, that was I really enjoyed that. That was great. So I've just got a couple of questions left to ask. It's kind of one question, but in two halves. So the first question is, what has been your biggest mistake in life? And the second question is, what has been your best decision in life? So what do you think might have been your biggest mistake?
Well, getting married a few times to the wrong person, I guess. I don't think I've made too many mistakes. I probably, like all of us, we probably handled things not as well as we could have when it came to relationships and things. There's a few things I wish I could have done better when it came to that, but I was young and stupid and just didn't have enough life experience to handle things all the time in the best possible way. As far as best decisions, I don't even know if I've made a good decision ever, but I'm hoping I'll make some good decisions down the road, or today at least. I guess maybe just starting the band with Glenn was a good decision, but then again, it's been nothing but misery ever since. So I couldn't really tell you what my best decision was.
It's a very honest way to look back and say, talking about life and relationships. I think to look back and say, I could have done that better. I think a lot of us think that as we get older, but it's funny, we can't say that at the time.
Yeah, of course. I wish I could have done some things, and that's only that. I wish I could have been more mature. Could have cared more about some people's feelings, but that's all because of youth. When you get older, you learn things, you realize that it's more important to care about other people than yourself, things like that. But other than that, I really have no regrets. I love where I am in life. Everything is going great as far as I'm concerned. And I would just only thing I care about is the next painting and the next record I hope to put out. So I just want to keep doing that because that's what I like.
Yeah, the last question I was going to ask you is what are your wants? What's your dream for your life ahead? Is how you see the rest of your life? Is creativity probably the most important thing to you?
Yeah, I don't have any plans. I don't make plans. I don't even make plans as far as like, Thursday. No, it's all about waking up and going, okay, well, what can I do today? Or let's try to have a good day. Let's try to finish that painting. Let's, hopefully, like I'll be driving in the car and some new song idea will come to me. That's all I care about. And just trying to do that. Yeah, I basically all that. I don't have any plans. I just would like to make another record. I put out a record last year and it's already a year old. So I'm like, because I hadn't done one in like 10 years. And I'm like, now I just want to make another record. And I want the next painting to be better than the last one. Same. So that's all I really care about.
That's lovely. It's been a real pleasure talking to you. I think we've kind of covered everything, and it's been yeah. There's some people where Tony and I, you can tell we just don't have to work at the interview at all, and this has felt like that. This has felt like such an easy chat. You seem like such a genuine guy, and you deserve the kind of content lifestyle you seem to have. So I've really enjoyed chatting. It's been
absolutely. A pleasure. I just want to let everybody know that Eerie's pictures and original paintings and his book, and the link will be in our bio so that you can go straight to his page. And
yeah, if people want to contact me, it's just EerieVon777 @gmail.com. I answer all my mail, so they can get the books, paintings, anything they want directly from me. Are you still there?
I think Tony might have dropped the line there. You there, Tony?
Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, yeah, I think somebody's gone. But
yeah, I think so too.
It's just been a pleasure talking to you both. And that's about it. I have to go to the store and I have to do something with these kittens.
Yeah, I was going to say, go look after those kids.